So we have our collision shapes, and now it's time to set up the constraints for the joints. And I'm going to drop down an agent configure joints. This used to be really tricky because before we had actually going to drop down a test ragdoll sim here just to show what I mean. And before we had this allow initial violation of limits, it was really easy to get a natural snaps when triggering ragdolls, but now it's much less of a problem. Just so you know where this is actually in the sim, it's on the constraints. If I would go into this test ragdoll sim, you can see that it's actually on this cone twist constraint, and there is allow initial violation of limits, just so you can find it yourself. Okay, so let's put that inside. Let's start with the head. For the head, I usually don't want it to be able to arc back too much, and actually in general, you don't want to give your joints their actual full range of motion, because then you'll just end up with very floppy limbs. Try to have them constrained to some kind of mid-range. So in this case, I will do, that was a little bit too much, maybe something like that. And then usually I stay away from this twist rotation range. For heads, you can actually have it. So if I press Z, which is a shortcut to get the handle for the twist. So I'm gonna get that out a little bit. So if I switch back with F to rotation angles, now you can see these yellow guides, and it is really important, as I said before, to have this up vector here in between those. Otherwise it will try to snap back there. Okay, so here's the head, and then let's move on to the shoulder. And for the shoulder, it's also a tricky area. Your shoulder actually have a lot of flexibility, but if you give it the real range of motion, you're gonna get very floppy arms. Depending on what kind of shot you are working on, give it something that works for that shot. I want to have the arm be able to go down, so I'm gonna have that kind of generous, and maybe go forward, not that much backward actually, so more something like that. And in some cases I guess it could go more upwards, but I'm gonna take it down a little bit, so it would be something like this. And I'm staying away from this twist rotation range here. I know that Side Effects has it in their setup, but I want to get problems from it. So, and then I'm going to go to the elbow, and here I just want to have the rotation on one plane. Let's see if I can move this silly thing. Okay, so let's here we go. And for this you can see it's not entirely where you expect it to be, because you want to, if you look at his elbow here, you don't want it to go up that plane. That is like a weird way of rotating your elbow. So in that case, I will press O, and then I will rotate this cone in place. And by the way, you can get all this handled by right click, and then you will have the handles there. And so O, rotating it. This is more something I would expect. Pressing F again, so I can continue working on it like this. And now you can see that this twist range and this up vector is not aligning anymore. But that doesn't matter just because we have 0 in the twist rotation range. So then you don't have to care about it. Otherwise it would be a problem. And for the hand, I just want to have a little bit of up and down. Something like this. And here is also a place where I obviously need to rotate it. So press O again. I'm gonna get it something like that, and maybe rotate it like this, something like that. I don't want to have that much motion. I just want to have to feel some flexibility, but I don't want to have all the hands to be in a 90 degrees angle either. Something like that. When I can get away with it, I try to keep the rotations in one plane, because there's nothing worse than a wobbly body part. Let's go to the spine, and I'm just going to put it a little bit back. If I would push it a lot back here, you're going to get a lot of arcing, so I don't want that, so I'm going to keep it like this. And then I'm going to do a tiny bit just to get the feel that has some flexibility. Once again, I'm staying away from the twist rotation range. Going down here to the legs, the rotation will be quite off. And I'm going to press O and just align this with the bone here. Here I'm also staying away from the twist rotation range. But say that you would want to have a twist rotation range, and then they are not aligning. To fix that, you press Shift O, and then you get this child rotation. So then I can rotate that to a line, but in this case it doesn't matter, but just so you know. So we have it something like that, and now I can fix this, maybe go up, so you can move boom. I will do the knees. Knees are very straightforward, just one axis, and I will have it something like this. And then for the foot, also kind of straightforward. I usually, most of the time, I don't want it to be that much, something like that maybe. Here is an example of an artistic choice with your constraint limits. If you make the knee range very wide and allows the feet to bend up, you'll get agents that tend to drop straight down on their knees a lot more, while in this case, when we have a more moderate range, the agent will just fall over. So do a lot of experimentation and see what kind of look your setup will generate. Before we are moving on, let us just see how side effects preset looks. So I'm going to drop down another agent configure joint. Agent configure joints. Let's go here and let's see that here. I have to say, I think you get pretty good result with this setup, but there are a lot of things that I wouldn't do in it. Like I said, I want to have the knees on just one plane. They have a lot of twist rotation in their setup, which I usually find troublesome. And one thing that I found interesting is that you can see here on the shoulder, you have the rotation up is not actually between the rotation guides. So if I would drop down a test simulation ragdoll and connect this guy here, you will see this very clearly if I go to constraints and turn off this allow initial violation of limits and look at his arms. Boom. So that is actually a very good example and see why you need to have this between in the limits, otherwise you're going to get this kind of pops. But like I said, a lot of times it's actually worked pretty well.